think the relevant background is this. I spoke no English at home. And when in secondary school, I was not allowed to speak Chinese in school. And to add to it, some of the students in DGS in my class were very naughty because we were not allowed to speak in Chinese in school. When we went out for lunch, we made a rule to forbid English. The penalty was a fine. So it was a very deliberate attempt to put the use of two languages used separately in separate situations. That was very interesting, and that, I think, has contributed to my background as a translator. My interest in translation and in literature arose because I was interested in literature, in Chinese literature, as well as English literature. My research degree was in English literature. My commitment to translation arose in the 1970s when the government made it possible for people to use Chinese as one of the official languages. And suddenly, I was teaching at university then, and suddenly everybody said we need translators. We needed translators, so some colleagues in the English department and some colleagues in the Chinese department at Hong Kong U grouped together to form the first degree in translation. A Chinese university had some courses in translation, but not a full degree program. Hong Kong University had the first degree program in translation, and then we all had to work to make that happen. That was how it all started. But my interest in both Chinese literature and English literature turned out to be very useful. That's how it got started. I didn't run the rendition, so I was a contributor to it. I would say that the rendition is an excellent quality journal in translating Chinese literature for a select audience, an academic audience, people like Western sinologists and Chinese scholars who wanted to see how other people saw Chinese culture, who also read the rendition. And some of us wanted to see how we can make Chinese literature interesting and enlightening, inspiring. Wanted to translate Chinese literature into English to share with people. I think it made a lot of contribution in helping people to understand Chinese culture at that quality level. Academics enjoyed it most of the time, I think. I think the second of the anthology that you talk about was compiled by, I think, Eva Hong. It was picked out from a lot of the previous work published in renditions and put together as an anthology. My contribution there was retrospective. They picked out some of the works that I did for them and incorporated into this one. The other one is different. Hong Kong Collage is different. I work very closely with my colleague Martha Zhao, who was also one time my student. I worked very closely with her because she wanted to compile an anthology to show people what contemporary Chinese literature was like. So she put together prose, short stories, and excerpts from novels and so on. And she invited me to contribute. I enjoyed thoroughly one of the pieces that she asked me to translate, the Crazy Horse section, which reflected in a very satirical way, humorous way, the anxieties of Hong Kong people during the approach of 1997. It was very, very amusing. It's a very good piece too. The editor has the sort of conductor's role. He or she puts together the pieces that would, in his or her mind, reflect certain aspects of contemporary life in China or in Hong Kong. The translator helps to make that work. The compilation of the anthology really depends on the person who orchestrates it, the editor. The translators are the musicians. They play the individual parts. There are different perspectives. If you were a writer, you would like your work to be known to more people. So that kind of anthology, that has one function. The other is people who are interested in the collective perspective on a culture. If you want to understand the culture and the people, you need to see what they think and how they feel and all that, and that comes over in the literature. And a good translator tries to put these together, and a good editor for an anthology puts the whole thing together in a kind of harmonious way to make a good anthology. Very important for image building. Sometimes people look at Hong Kong and say Hong Kong is a business world, there's no culture and all that. If we do not use translation to, or in even any anthology, if we don't use anthologies, either in English or in Chinese, to help people have a perspective on a culture, it's difficult for people to gather the impressions. Most people need a bit of help, and help can come in from the anthologies. For image building, it's very important. And once, it's not only just image building, but also understanding of a people, of a city, of a people, of a community. I was lucky to live in a time when all these interesting people lived and wrote. When I was young, grew up with people who wrote in literary supplements in newspapers and so on. And these people were part of my life, my part of my growing up. So learning about them and interacting with them is interesting. So when I could translate, I would naturally introduce the people that I know well to people in another culture, another language. It was great fun. I'm happy to say that I share my Hong Kong experience with the people that I translated. So there wasn't a great deal of difficulty. The difficulties, I think, come from certain genre. It's not a matter of culture that makes it difficult. It's a matter of the genre and the stylistic restrictions and so on. Like, for instance, it's not difficult to translate drama or prose work, short stories, novels. But when it comes to literary pieces, verse is not too difficult. When it comes to things like qi or lyrics, or the most difficult thing is to translate lyrics of songs. That is very difficult. This is why I admire Wang Jim so much. He can do terrific things with the lyrics. I have to admit, I live among friends, and I work with friends, I talk with friends. I never thought of myself as deliberately moving into a literary circle. So I don't quite know how to answer that question. I was a colleague with Yasi, colleague with Lo Wai Lun, Wu Yin-ching. Then we're just friends. I really did not think of people as a literary community. We're just friends. And then I don't always talk to them about their work. I read their work, but we don't talk about that very much. It's personal interaction most of the time. I had no pretensions. And I meet them and talk to them as friends. I don't see myself as trying to make an entry into a literary circle. Some people do this. I treat them as friends. I talk to them only when I feel there is something more I need to know. I come to think of it, I have not talked, when I translate Xiu Xi, I didn't talk to her about her work. But when I translated it, she's happy with it. That is how it works for me. On the other hand, when I translate drama, that's different. I translate scripts for actual stage productions. I always talk to the director first, because in translating a play, there are all different ways of presenting a play. Then you need to ask your director how he or she wants to present the play, what slant should like to use. Then knowing that, or how the play would be adapted for the stage, whether there should be a change in the setting, or the time setting, or geographic setting, all these matter. And I always, before I translate the play, I always ask this. For instance, I work very closely with Dr. Vicky Wee. I always talk to her great length and details and so on. I talk to her if she wants to, when she wanted to produce King Lear, I asked her what kind of an old man would she make this King Lear? Somebody who's larger than life, or somebody, a meaner old man, and so on. Now that made the difference to me, because I need to shape the language, twist the original a little, fine-tune it a little to make it appropriate, so that the actor would find it easier to fulfill the expectations of the director and yet have the lines to work with. So that is when I talk most. When I translated Comedy of Errors for Colin George at the APA. I said, what costumes will your actors be wearing? And said t-shirts, striped t-shirts, and you name me one of the props that you would use. It's a bicycle. then I know I would not use the Shakespearean language. I would turn the language into something like early 20th century Chinese. And use that so that the picture would come out right. Because if people wear traditional costumes, traditional Shakespearean costumes, and I translate in early 20s, in the 19th century, Chinese, then it wouldn't look right. So that the modulation of culture and time, all that, it matters a great deal. It matters a great deal in drama translation. That's when I talk to directors. But if you take something like Eva Hong asked me to translate Mok Yu Shu, a poem adapted from tone in traditional Chinese folk ballad Mok Yu Shu. When you read the original in Chinese, you read the poem in Chinese, it has that sound, the mood of Mok Yu Shu. You know Mok Yu Shu, like folk ballads, and it brings out a particular rhythm, a particular feel of nostalgia, and then this contemporary poem, uses that to talk about writing on the computer, about the pace at which letters appear on the computer screen, on the monitor. And the intriguing thing, the challenging thing is to make the two blend together. That I did that without having to ask, because I felt what the author wanted to say. Then it come out naturally. So I don't bother the authors very much when I translate their work, except when I come across difficulties. I haven't felt that for prose work. I am fairly good at entering into the consciousness of a writer. There are some writers for whom I feel very little simpatico. Then I'm not comfortable translating that work. It's happened once or twice. Not happy with it, so I back out. I'm lucky I have the luxury of choosing what I translate and what I don't want to translate. I'm lucky there. I come alive when we talk about drama. I love drama. I love operas. Peking opera particularly. I love the stage. I love drama, and when I had an opportunity to translate for the stage, I just love it. It was one of my passion. It started in the 1950s when I was studying. In the 1950s, there was a very big wave of activity in drama in England. And at that time, my English professor at Hong Kong U wanted students to learn contemporary English rather than Dickensian Victorian English. He wanted the students to learn contemporary English. So he started a course on contemporary English, imported a lot of English newspapers, flown in by air, so that the students could read those papers. We imported a whole lot of brand new contemporary British drama. At that time, drama was very active in Britain and in Europe. So we got a lot of exciting new things. And our students started reading these, and I started teaching them this, and we all got very excited by this new drama movement. You see, this is in Hong Kong at that time. There were very few good plays. We were talking about period drama, 清宫院, things like that, or anti-drug propaganda plays. But there were all these exciting things happening in the West, and we brought them back. And I convinced the professor, if you want people to speak good contemporary language, you got to show them how to do it, and by reading plays. So I convinced him to turn three professors' offices into a dark room like this, a studio. And we started producing plays in English, so people could practice using English. It was very effective, I must say. And then people wanted other people wanted to share that excitement, but they didn't have as much English. So we translated those plays. And there was one group which produced the same play in English and in Chinese, because they were bilingual, equally good in both languages. And that was fantastic. And then there was some pressure making us translate those plays and produce it for the public. So we did that. Some friends formed together a theatre group called the Seals Theatre Company, and we produced many translated plays. And there was another group at the Hong Kong U also produced a lot of these plays. So there was a great deal of activity, translation, drama. That's how it started. No, it's not a matter of including it to other things, but it was a whole concept that these three communities, Chinese communities, how they are surviving in these troubled times when they were divided by culture, by politics, and so on. The Oxford Anthology of Chinese Drama, that was started by Dr. Vicky Wee. She had that vision. She had the vision, and she said, nobody outside of Hong Kong knew anything about Hong Kong drama. And in Hong Kong, we know nothing about Chinese drama on the mainland or in Taiwan. That's not a good situation. So she wanted to try to bring these drama activities together in some massive sort of triennial activities and so on, but that involved a lot of money, a lot of planning. She started doing it, but other people who had more money work on that too. So we didn't do that after all. But this dream, Martha Jung and I picked up, and we said, although we cannot maneuver so many theatre groups together because we don't have the resources, we can put the plays from these three places together to let the world know what the Chinese are doing about drama. And we looked at the activities in Beijing. We went to Beijing to collect that. We went to Taiwan to collect. We went to a lot of trouble to collect things. And the important thing is we wanted to see whether we stay with realism, naturalism, and to see if people in different places have started branching out, exploring new ways of producing plays. And it was very interesting. We took plays from Beijing, plays from Taiwan, plays from Hong Kong, and all turned out to be trying to experiment in different ways. This is why that anthology was very interesting, and that anthology attracted attention of people outside of China, outside of Hong Kong. And when that book was published, I actually had requests for permission to perform those plays. Some plays are very difficult for foreigners to perform, but the simpler ones have been performed a number of times in Taiwan and in the States. That means it's getting through to people, and it's making people know that we are doing this interesting stuff in different ways, in different places. So it's important to get things done in that way, because it's image building, but it's also looking at how the three different Chinese communities are attempting new things in different directions. Anybody who's interested in what's happening to the Chinese, anybody who's interested in the future of China, this was some time ago, before the return of, before 1990s, around 1997, but before we know what's happening. We now look back on hindsight, but those days we were all wondering. But still in Taiwan, they're still wondering, right? So for Chinese people, for drama people, because there are all these different variations in exploration, in new experiments. So if you're interested in drama and drama experiments, there's an interesting variety of styles to look at and to see how these things are used to incorporate contemporary ideas. Then it's also this image building, so people know what the Chinese are doing, and the people in Taiwan will know what's happening on the mainland, and we know what's happening in Taiwan, and so on. It's good for bonding, and it's also good for image building to a non-Chinese community. I have translated quite a lot of plays, and most plays did not present any difficulty for me. There was one problem that bugged my career as a translator. There was a pun in a play called Noises Off. There was a pun on the word chic and sheet. It's a pun which created a lot of stage difficulties for people. I could not translate that pun, so I turned down the commission. I was invited by the director, Dr. Vicky Wee, to translate that play, and I told her I couldn't do this pun. And she said, try to skip over it. I couldn't. I said, in my youth, I was very arrogant. I said, I would not skip over something I do not know. So I didn't, so I turned it down. It's a very interesting stage play. Later on, it was translated by somebody else, and the play was staged. I think Dr. Vicky Wee never forgave me for that. Years after, whenever she mentions this, she would scold me. An interesting thing is, many years later, one night when I was sleeping, I dreamt of a way of translating that. And I was very happy I said, I'll wake up and I will tell Dr. Wee to vindicate myself. This one thing I could not translate. I woke up and I forgot it. So to this day, this is the one difficulty I could not cross over. Even when I was translating King Lear, I had no problem. with it. When you can enter into the consciousness of the writer, you enter into the consciousness of the writer, you become the writer, and you understand what it is that he wants to say. And then you can say it in exactly the same style, in exactly the same rhythm, in exactly the same posture. That the secret is entering into the consciousness of the writer when writing that piece. If you want to try to translate something from the outside, you only get the outside. But if you try to go into the consciousness of the writer, you feel what he feels. You breathe and you use the rhythm that he uses, and you get it, and you make a good translator. Talk about Hong Kong first. In Hong Kong, all three places have kept the interest, the utilitarian interest of naturalistic drama to reflect contemporary political and social environment. In Hong Kong, the play, Chen Gamqun's play, Hong Kong House, was a reflection of Hong Kong at a time, at a sort of crucial time, wondering about its future. So it was a naturalistic but symbolic play. In Beijing, you do also have naturalistic plays which reflected the community. In Taiwan as well. In Taiwan, the Taiwan people are more experimental. They do symbolic things, but they exaggerate, they incorporate drama, Peking opera drama, and so on, into reflecting their political dilemma. And also they have symbolic plays where everything is detached from the naturalistic level. And then they have humor, a lot of humorous plays to reflect the situation. In Hong Kong, we have that, and we have Zhun Lim, Isocohedron. They also go into experimental things, but in the abstract. You have impromptu things, you have movement, have noise levels. It was quite a departure from the naturalistic. The experimentation in Beijing was very interesting. Went into the mythical and incorporating Peking drama into contemporary drama. So I think if one reads the anthology, one notices these things, that three places have a kind of root, just as they share a naturalistic basis of drama. And then they have all these interesting explorations in different directions. So it's good experience to know what's happening. I had a lot of difficulty at first trying to understand what editors do in an anthology. If the editor chooses to, he can do a whole lot of things. To work on the concept of an anthology, what it's supposed to do, what to include and all that, and then to provide the material, to collect the material, and to select the material, right? And then to have the material translated. And having got the material translated, he has to do the editing to ensure quality, accuracy, quality, appropriateness, right? And after that, it goes to print, and the editor has then to go through the copy editing, right? And dealing with the funding, right? And dealing with the publisher, yes. So the perfect editor for an anthology does all these things. But some editors do some, and other editors do others. And sometimes you have a whole lot of editors doing the whole thing together. Now I know this. At first, when I first got into this business, I wonder about it. But it does depend on who is the editor and what does she want or he want to do. Sometimes some editors would only deal with the concept and you have to do all the other things. So if you ask me what the editor can do all or some of these. Some people are only doing the copy editing to make sure that the manuscript is properly presented in the print version. That is an editor. But the person who oversees the whole thing is also an editor, but it depends. My own work as a translator, well, a translator gets asked, invited, ordered to translate a certain work, and the translator has to do justice to the work that is translated and give it to the editor, right? So one's involvement as a translator is different from that of an editor. But sometimes the translator does some of the editor's work. I have one overriding demand of myself. It is to do whatever I do well. If I do it well, then I am happy. That goal hasn't changed. The happiest moment is when I feel I've done good work. I've done work that will help people feel good, happy, to increase people's understanding, to nurture a kind of sensitivity to humanity. That is good. That's as high sounding as I can make it.